On today's episode, we're going to talk about character development and how my years of living abroad have helped me create more interesting and realistic characters. Hello, Yin Lieblings. I'm Mari, science fiction and fantasy author who's been living in southern Germany since 2014. Today we're going to talk about people and how studying different cultures can help you create a larger spectrum of fascinating characters. But before we get started, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell if you haven't already. Here on Adventures of Lamari, we talk about writing, living abroad, and everything in between. First off, you like my hat? You like my hat? I don't you never get a chance to wear this hat. Maybe I need to wear more hats on this channel. What do you guys think, huh? Think it looks good? You think it looks good? I love me some peacocks, man. I got this in Austria for my birthday last year. But this hat I got in Mooswiese, Deutschland, which has been canceled this year because of the Rona. Anyway, totally random. But first off, have you seen those commercials for Masterclass on YouTube with, well, one of them specifically is with David Sedaris, who said the best quote in this minute commercial that encompasses this episode. If you want to write about people, you have to be interested in people, which is brilliant. It's utterly brilliant. In today's industry, readers are more interested in character-driven stories and not plot-driven. So you need to create engaging and realistic characters. And sometimes it's a lot harder than you think. If you saw my episode, one of my first ones, about why I moved to Germany, you'll know briefly about my history of being a Peruvian American mutt who used to spend her summers in Peru. I've studied abroad in Spain, and now I live in southern Germany. Then again, if you haven't seen the episode, you know this stuff now. But you can still watch the episode. I'll put the link above. They say write what you know, and I like to think that I know people. Because growing in with a foot in two different cultures has given me this superpower that has helped me write characters, and that is empathy. Granted, empathy is not really a superpower, and you don't necessarily have to live abroad to obtain empathy, but at least that's how it kind of developed for me. In the ability to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes, at least as unbiased as possible, but at least to understand from a logical point of view, is absolutely necessary to be able to create these characters without necessarily putting way too much of yourself into them. Because you see, growing up Peruvian and American, I was raised to see that no country is perfect, nor is one actually better than the other. I've grown up seeing that there are aspects of Peruvian and American culture that are beautiful and wonderful and that make me proud to be a part of, to have the blood running through my veins. But there are also uglier parts. And I'm sure any person in any country can say that about their country, of course. You learn to, and I like being able to go to different countries because it helps me appreciate what I have for my country more, what things I would like to see better in my country, but I still love my country more in a sense because I appreciate it for what it is, warts and all, because that is true love. But by being in other countries, you also see how they react to certain things, how their history has shaped them, whether it is something that our countries, it is a shared history, but how they react to it, how did it shape them as a community and also as individuals. And then by seeing that, it kind of gives you a roadmap when you're trying to create characters and you want them to behave a certain way or to react a certain way, because you have to think back as to the why and the how to get to that point. So empathy gives you that roadmap. And sometimes you find the reasoning for something so small can actually lead to something bigger. Now, the big example that I want to use is very typical Midwestern behavior, which is whenever you see somebody, when you're walking down the street and you make eye contact with them and you smile and you may mutter a quick hello. That's very typical in the Midwest where I'm from, because we're taught as children that is it's the way to be polite to people, and sometimes we are also under the impression that you never know how another person's feeling, and oh, you never know, you know, that may make their day. I don't know. I mean, we just like to try to have a more positive outlook about these things. And I know that it's also very common for Germans to dismiss such behavior and say that we Americans are fake. Ironically, though, where I live in Germany, they do that here. It is not uncommon for me to go down the street and I make eye contact with some random stranger and they smile at me and they'll say Servus. Or if it's after the Mahlzeit, especially at work, Mahlzeit. And it's actually one of the reasons why I really like where I live here in Germany, because it does remind me of home in that sense. But then again, I shouldn't be surprised because I am from Indiana, and Indiana was settled by a large German and Swiss population. So if you really think about it, there shouldn't really be necessarily too many cultural differences between Germans in Germany and those of German descendants in Indiana. I think maybe one day I would do a video. I would like to maybe do a video of that. I'd be like showing cultural similarities between like Indiana and Germany, because I would only be talking about the specific region that I live in just because I have noticed a lot of similarities. And yeah, and it's good. It's good for me because it is those little tiny things that keep me from getting homesick too often, because it does remind me of home. Random tangent, I know. However, when I lived in Sevilla, in Spain, in 2008, I actually got an entirely different reaction. Whenever I walked down the street when I was coming home from class and I would see somebody and I'd accidentally make eye contact with them and smile, I would either get like a look of anger or suspicion, or like the people would like walk like, you know, a wide berth around me, like, what the hell, you know? And I remember kind of really being taken aback by it. That was the first time that I had actually experienced somebody that was rather antagonistic towards something for me that I see as so simple as just smiling. And this was with a lot of older generations. Of course, if it were young men, they assumed that I was hitting on them, so they would hit on me back, or worse, follow me home. Yeah, that wasn't fun. But I remember talking to my host mom about this, and I didn't know. I didn't understand. I was like, that is just so weird because in my culture, that is so normal and blah, blah, blah. And she was like, well, you do have to realize from our history, during the time of Francisco Franco, neighbors were pitted against each other. Everybody spied on everybody. You didn't know who to trust. And that kind of has just carried over. Franco's regime ended in 1975. And, you know, and it made sense with these older generations who've lived through this distrust of their own neighbor, of their own, you know, their own fellow Spaniard. And I didn't think about that. And I think that was, because, you know, I'm half Peruvian. With Latinos, you do the same thing as well. Actually, our social rituals are a lot more complex than Americans, in my opinion. So I expected the Spaniards to be the same way, which is, again, why I was so taken aback. But yeah, they didn't experience Franco's regime, of course. Like, Peru has had their own history of military dictatorships, but I don't know if they've ever gone so far as being forced to spy on each other. I mean, any more than they would anyway, because, you know, we Latinos love our chisme, but not to the same extent. Definitely not to the same extent as under Franco's regime. But I really appreciated seeing something so small, like something like that would be perfect for a story, you know, to have a character also experience, you know, being in a community or a country or whatever that is in the recovery process of such a harsh period in history. And, you know, because that's something you do have to think about. Like, people are not going to, you know, after suffering through something like that, it's not necessarily, they're not going to be happy-go-lucky. Of course, it's natural, of course, they're going to be suspicious that these things that they were forced to do will carry on for a while. It's not like it's going to turn off like a light switch. You see, with empathy, you don't see the world as black and white, or right or wrong, or good or evil, because the world is too gray. There's too much in between. And the same would go with your characters when you're writing them, because that's how people are. It's very hard to, there are very few people in human history that you can really put in either side of the spectrum. There's always some little bit of grayness to 95% of them. And having that moral grayness. And there's a really great video, by the way, from Megan Tennant about gray morality of villains and characters, and I will put the link of that below. But it also makes more compelling characters. I think like the worst and scariest villains are the ones that you can kind of relate on some level. And it's like, for example, Judge Claude Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame, I think is hands down the worst Disney villain, because I think most women have experienced a Frollo in their lives. He was the most realistic villain. And that's why, you know, like to look at, and I think he would definitely be on like the extreme of like evil. There's very little like grayness to him, but there is so much of him that is based in reality. It's terrifying. And I just really appreciate that. I really appreciate having had this experience of living in a different country. And it's actually the big reason why I created this channel. You know, like doing these exercises, like I said with my health insurance video, like helps me remember that the world is so complex and so big, and to put these puzzle pieces together in such a way that when it comes down to creating characters, I already have my brain is already wired to think like that anyway. Because life and stories, if they're if they're too simple, they're boring, and none of us want that. Granted, being able to simplify everything is easier to digest and therefore easier to dismiss, but I feel like we do ourselves a great disservice when we do that. Not only as writers, but as just human beings in general. That was a really weird rant, but I definitely wanted to just touch on how living in Germany has helped me understand more of the human experience, and thus helped me be a better writer. And, you know, thank you, Germans. Thank you, Peruvians, and thank you, Americans. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for hanging out for my random ramblings. If you are new here, please consider subscribing and give this video a thumbs up. It lets me know and YouTube know that you like content like this and you'd like to see more. If you have any questions, comments, or any other topics you'd like to see on this channel, please let me know in the comments below. The God Queen is available in both ebook and paperback. I have all the links in the description below. And don't forget to connect with me on social media, whether it is through Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. And that's it for today. Until next time, ade!